the majority of markets that people who coach are in, they're basically versions of helping people with their health, helping them with wealth, helping them with their relationships, and generally helping them with improve their life, like general personal development. All of those markets, they're all pretty evergreen markets in the sense that people are always interested in health, wealth, relationships, and improving themselves.
Our ever-changing world calls upon the most courageous, resilient, and relentless of us to face its most extraordinary challenges. To help you embark on this journey, we present the Impactful Coaching Podcast, your oasis for inspiration and a beacon to spark the fires of greatness within you. I'm Joseph. I will be your ally in this journey to empower your potential. Join us each week as we dive deep into the heart of ambition, drive, and success to unravel compelling stories of daring leaders who dreamed, struggled, and achieved victory. Our journey begins now. How is everybody doing? My name is Joseph, and welcome back, or welcome for the first time, if this happens to be your first time, to the Impactful Coaching Podcast. As always, I've been in media for quite a while. I've got a number of episodes under my belt, and each and every one of these really does mean the world to me because it's a new contact, it's a new opportunity to learn something, collect something. Am I going to use some of it for my own benefit? You better believe I got to use it for my own benefit, but also to share that with all of you as well. So I thank you as always for being here. And to my guest today, Ron Reich, thank you as well for being on the program. Before we do anything else, this isn't even question zero. This is like question -1. How are you doing today? How are you feeling?
I am all good. Yeah, it's been an exciting day. I'm excited to connect with you today.
Fantastic. So this one just came into my mind right now. I just want to ask this as a fun warm-up, but how much of a traveler are you? Are you nomadic, or do you have a base of operations?
Yeah, so I would say I am definitely more well-traveled than the average person for sure. I was actually living in Colombia, South America for the last 2 years up until last December. And me and my wife recently moved to the Houston, Texas area. I actually do like to have a home base, to answer your question. I've never done like the full nomadic thing. I've been kind of going back and forth between the US and South America since about 2013, but I always kind of find myself staying in one place. And these days I do travel a decent amount, mostly in the US just for business purposes. There's a lot of conferences going on. I also run my own live events that are typically in states that are different than mine. So yeah, that would be the answer to that question.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I myself, I'm very much a hermit. I was doing remote work like before remote work really took popularity.
Cool. Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly. So, but definitely like the travel bug is gnawing away at me. So, one of these days I got to head up with it. But that's not what we're talking about today. All right. So first things first. Now this is, an actual question. Would you kindly share with the audience, what you do, what you're up to these days, what services you provide, and what brings you to our show today?
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for asking. So yeah, my name is Ron Reich, and I'm essentially a business coach and marketing strategist for emerging mission-driven coaches. Typically, the people I work with are established coaches that are doing typically $100,000 to $500,000 per year in revenue. And I really help them typically add anywhere from like $30,000 to $50,000 of profit to their business without any additional traffic, and help them scale to 7 figures.
There's definitely something that has stuck out to me when I was doing research on this. And I was thinking about maybe I want to ask this later, but it is such a pressing question, I can't help myself. So I want to ask it now. So when working with these clients, is it strictly an iterative process where you are able to build on what has been brought to you, or have you encountered situations where things actually needs to be maybe scaled back or dialed back or deconstructed in a way first, so that way you can rebuild and create something healthier, more profitable?
It's interesting. The answer is yes. Basically, the answer is yes.
Okay.
In the sense that, so typically, I'm actually not really that. I'm really an optimizer. That's like a thing that's been like a constant throughout my life. I've always been good at taking things that are already working and optimizing them. So for me, my real superpower is taking somebody who's already doing pretty well, who already has some established assets, and really unlocking them and really unlocking their business. Typically, they need to have some legitimate assets in place. They need to be a little established for them to be someone that I can really help. Having said that, that's to answer your first question.
Sure.
At the same time, to answer your second question, oftentimes the best, one of my favorite forms of math is addition by subtraction. Oftentimes the fastest path for someone to get to, from 200,000 to 500,000. I wouldn't even say oftentimes, most of the time, from someone to go to $200,000 a year to $500,000 a year, or $500,000 to $1,000,000 a year, or even beyond that, it's often by eliminating things. It's figuring out what is there that they need to stop doing, and what is it that they should double down on, and that's going to be that clearest path to getting them to where they want to go. So a lot of times there is a lot of that, like you said, deconstruction and elimination, and you could say rebuilding, in a sense that we're kind of rebuilding to a place of simplicity.
One limiting factor that I've seen manifest before throughout the many of the discussions that I've had, not just here but prior to, is this innate drive, or in this innate need to hang on to certain aspects of the operation. Someone who wants to be very hands-on and is always rolling up their sleeves and is always focusing on something that might not be the most efficient use of their time. And I'll tell you a quick story, because my friend had this more interesting observation than I did, and then I'll characterize it as a question. So my friend, he's in IT, he loves doing it, and he's really happy doing the automation side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he had got a lot of pushback from a lot of his coworkers because he was kind of making things run a lot smoother. And he's like, why are people not happy about this? Things are getting more efficient. And I said, you know why? It's because people like being busy. They like showing up. They like feeling like they're doing, 6 to 8 hours worth of work.
Mm-hmm.
Even if that work might not be as impactful as some of the other things that they're doing, because there's almost like this place of fear of, well, if I'm not doing this, then all of a sudden, my actual responsibilities are only 2 hours. I might be made redundant. So there's fear in there. There's compulsion in there. Can you speak to that? Have you come across an innate need for people to hang on to certain aspects of their business, and that might be what's holding them back?
It's interesting. The answer to this question is, I don't think it's exactly that, because the truth of the matter is that, actually, let me give you a story that I'll tell you, is that there's been studies on this. I've taken surveys of this at the events I've done, and that if you look at how many productive hours the average, even high-level entrepreneur has per day, what would you guess the average is?
7.
Dude, you're so wrong. The average high-level successful entrepreneurs, they do between 1 to 2 hours of actual productive work per day. By actual productive work, what we're talking about are things that actually measurably move their business forward, like things that actually drive revenue, essentially. So here's the thing. Most people, they vastly overestimate kind of how actual productive they are. And so they're just not as productive as they could be. They're really distracted in a lot of ways. Oftentimes they're literally distracted by things that they should not be distracted with, like spending too much time on social media or checking email 50 times a day when they could be working on things that are more productive. Or they're, to your point, they're just working on things that they shouldn't be working on. They're doing things that are busy, things that don't actually drive revenue. Like a good example would be like the coach who has a relatively established business, and they're still like answering all their customer service emails, or they're still queuing up their emails that they're sending out and things like that. But they're still spending time on that just because they don't know any other way. And a lot of these coaches, if you ask them, they'll say, oh, I'm working really hard. I'm working 50, 60 hours a week. But to your point, and what I would contend is like, yeah, you might be clocking in 50 hours a week, but you're probably only doing, who knows, maybe 5 hours a week of things that are actually making a big difference in your business. So a lot of what I'm doing is just helping people figure out, okay, what are those actual measurable focus things that you could be working on that really are going to drive your business forward.
I want to get one more take on something along this thread, and then after that, I want to get into your backstory, because for one, backstories is a part and parcel to podcasting, but it's also good to ask that because you get to establish threads for how those threads have carried on through the remainder of the career. But my experience from working in a 9-to-5 setting versus becoming a freelancer, the single most drastic difference is that disconnect between the hours that I'm working on paper versus the actual hours that I'm laboring and I'm doing something of value. So I could show up to an office. I did show up to an office, and some days are busy. And I ended up working the entire thing, very little time for coffee breaks or washrooms. And then there's other days where I'm sitting around and I'm just like, what? There's got to be something I can do because I'm fearful of my well-being. Like if I don't do anything, I might lose the job. And that fear came true. it was insolvent after a year. So what I'm getting at here is, as a freelancer specifically, I'm only being paid for when I'm working, which means that I can sit in the office for 8 hours, but if I only work for 2 hours, the clock is only on for 2 hours. And I appreciate that, but I think it has also deflated a lot of the value that companies are getting out of their workers. And, far be it for me to be like the pro-capitalist guy here, but a lot of the times companies are just putting a lot of money in and people are not providing labor. Do you have any personal experience with that? Do you feel that there is a disconnect between this idea of people being in their work state, and is there like a minimum level of value that people should be providing, even if they're just on hand ready to answer a call that maybe the call's not coming in?
I mean, I have thoughts on this, but it's
Sure.
sort of outside my wheelhouse in the sense that 100% there's a lot of room for optimization when it comes to the work environment, like actual people that have offices and getting the most out of their employees. I know there are certain companies, I think might even do this in certain, or just let's say certain companies that they've actually moved to like a 4-day work week, and that's actually made people more efficient. It's been better for everybody because like Parkinson's law, like if you only have 4 days to do all your work, you're going to get it done, versus if you have 7, you're going to get it done in 7.
Mm-hmm.
So having said that, yeah, there's a lot of optimization based on what you're saying. But most of the people I work with, they're essentially whatever you want to call them. They're practitioners, they're entrepreneurs, they're business owners, where it really is up to them to maximize their own efficiency, right? So they can make as much money as they want to make. And so, but it's interesting because a lot of them, a lot of them do kind of have that kind of going back to what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. A lot of them do have that that kind of employee mentality where it's like, well, if you ask them, hey, I worked 7 hours today, I worked 8 hours today, but then if you look at their actual productive output, which is pretty easily measurable, right? Mm-hmm. You can measure it by like how successful their business is, how much money they're making, especially how much money they're making compared to how much money they could be making, right? And not always, but oftentimes, like if somebody's like struggling, oftentimes it's just because they're not being as personally effective as they could be. And that's a big kind of along these lines. One of the things that that does kind of bug me a little bit in the coaching space.
Sure.
Is that a lot of people think that it's like the team, like having a bigger team or having a magical team member is going to be the answer for them to get their business to the next level. And my contention is that, yeah, first you need to become really effective. You need to become as effective as possible, and get your business to a good place. Like let's say, at least $500,000 a year before you're really gonna really start expanding with a team. Guy who's really smart in the coaching space named Taylor Welsh, mm-hmm. He gave this rule of thumb, which is that for every one employee that you have, you need to be making at least $400,000 in revenue. And that was always a good rule of thumb to me. So it's like, and let's say that's $160,000 per year employee. So what that means is that if you're doing less than $500,000 a year, you should not be spending more than $5,000 a month on your team. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it really is up to you to really be the person who's driving the revenue, who's making things happen. And to do that, you really want to be spending your time really focused on sales and marketing related activities, which we can chat about more later if you want.
Mm-hmm. And as I said, I do want to get into your backstory, but there's just one more follow-up that to me is just way too important to risk forgetting to ask it later. So when you said that the amount of time that an entrepreneur is really working at peak efficiency is 1 to 2 hours, and I knew I was overshooting it, but man, I didn't think I was overshooting it that much. So for the optimal avatar of a coach, or not a coach, sorry, for an entrepreneur. So that's 2 hours worth of work in the day. What is the best thing to do with the rest of that time? If you
Oh,
know,
yeah,
if
I'm sorry. I think I might not have actually mentioned. I no, no, no. I don't think I said that right. What I said was, I mean, in real life, optimal is like 4 to 5 hours is the actual optimal amount.
okay,
So yeah. So really, I would contend, should be working 4 to 5 hours of like doing focused productive work per day, averaging about 4.5. But they're really only doing about 90 minutes per day. Does that make sense?
yeah, I see what you mean. So there's one way I relate it to, because I come from film. So you have your principal production, which is the actual making of the product, but then you have two steps, one before, one after. So you have your warm up stuff to it, the foundational stuff you have to do in preparation, and then the cleanup and the wrapping up work afterwards. But the key work is done in the middle.
Yeah, yeah. So for sure. So that same analogy would be true. So ideally, so typically, to be honest, like a high level, an actual high level entrepreneur is probably spending they're probably working a solid 40-hour work week. Like really I think I actually read somewhere that basically the average successful high performing entrepreneur that's not burnt out works about 44 hours a week. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say a solid 40-hour work week. That would be 8 hours per day of like their total actual work day. So to your point, that would be within that 8 hours, there'd be about 4 to 5 hours of productive, focused work.
Mm-hmm.
And then within that 8 hours also includes like breaks and things like that.
Yeah.
Within that 8 hours also includes, you do need to do some administrative type things. Like you do need to check your emails. You do need to like plan for the next day. There are things that kind of, I'm not sure that I can't remember to say, like there's the warm up and the cleanup.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the exact same metaphor. But so all those would happen in the 8 hour workday for sure.
Mm-hmm. So far be it for me to have the best transition of all time, but last thing I want to do is bring up another question and then keep being on this loop. So from your backstory, here's what I know is that you were making your way through law school. It wasn't exactly, you didn't have your full heart in it. And although it wasn't the direction you committed to, first, I'd love to hear, what were some of the steps that happened prior to that? What drove you into attempting that in the first place? But the prevailing question that really sticks out to me is, let's say you're going through engineering or doctoring. There are different methodologies and ways to study that are necessary to committing to those practices. So what impact did studying to become a lawyer have on the way that you conduct business to this day, such as, learning how to practice due diligence and research?
It's interesting. That's actually it's a good question. No one's ever.
I'm glad to hear that.
Good questions. No one's ever asked me these kind of questions before.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. If I don't have a full-on KPI, but if I did, that would be my KPI.
There we go. That's a good one. So the reason why I went to law school, really because I remember it was my senior year of college, and I was working this job that I didn't really like. It was a warehousing job. It was the summer before my senior year of college, and I really did. I was like, and I just had this thought. I was like, dude, work sucks. I do not want to get a real job.
Yeah.
And I was like 20, 21 at the time, just really nervous about that. So I was like, and I just had that thought. Well, how can I procrastinate on it? How could I kick kick that can down the road and not get a real job? I was like, well, I like going to school. There was lawyers in my family, so I think my parents would be supportive of it. I had one of my really good friends at the time. He was a year ahead of me, and he was planning on going to law school. So I just kind of had that epiphany moment, like, oh, you know what? Screw it. I think I'll go to law school. That sounds good to me. And so that's what I decided to do. And then, once you go to law school, once you get into that environment, I kind of convinced myself that being a lawyer would have been a good idea. So it turned out not to be a good idea, as you alluded to. But having said that, the thing that I really, really did learn, the number one thing I learned in law school was really exactly what you mentioned. That first year of law school specifically, it is no joke. Like it's really intense. Like it is really intense. And I actually, no joke, despite what we mentioned earlier about, working, 1.5 to 4.5 hours a day, I was literally studying 6 to 8 hours a day. And like, especially your first year. It's like if you don't survive that first year of law school, they essentially kick you out. You essentially have to repeat the first year or you get kicked out of school. So it's really intense.
Mhm.
And your entire grade is determined by one test for you have like 5 or 6 different classes that are all year long classes or like in a school year. So 9 months, like a normal school year. But your grade on those classes is all based on one test that you take at the end of the year. That is what your entire grade is based on. So it's
So like
super,
100%.
yes. So
Wow.
it's super duper intense. I think I'm not sure how it is these days. When it was, that's how it was in my class. I think I might have had a couple classes where you took a test at the end of the first semester, which was it counted for some of it. But yes, it was like really intense. So the point I'm getting at is that the thing I really learned in law school was all those things related to like discipline and focus and studying, basically stuff like that. As far as like, yeah, anyone who's gone to law school will tell you that you actually don't learn the thing that you actually learn in law school is not actually how to be a lawyer, like how to like argue cases and stuff like that. You learn to think like a lawyer. That's like the actual skill they teach you in law school. But beyond that, the thing I didn't really, I guess I did learn that, but the thing I really learned was actually, again, discipline, focus, and things along those lines, which honestly have served me well since then, for sure.
What I find, coming from the creative point of view, we thrive in procrastination, and then, man, those last 12 hours are nuts. It's just the idea that so much of the grade is only taking place in one test, right, with a couple of miscellaneous ones, and yet for the rest of the semester, or sorry, the 2 semesters, that there's little things that are happening that are impactful on that final grade. It's just hard to imagine how somebody can develop that kind of discipline when you really only when the alarm is really only going off towards the end of it. So like on a day-to-day basis, what kept you and the other students, focused?
No. The thing is, this is my experience as well as pretty much all the peers my direct peers and people that I spent time with. And again, things might be different these days, but I promise, no joke, like these tests, they were really difficult. These were dense topics. These were not the kind of tests that like the average person, because yeah, I went to college as well, right? Like
Yeah.
when I was in college, I know exactly what you're talking about procrastinating until you have your midterm or you your final test until like 48 hours beforehand. I promise you, just because of the amount of information you would have to know and be tested on and be ready for, the average person could not just
Mm-hmm.
procrastinate on that for the last minute. That was one variable. The other variable is that the way and that's really the big one. That's like about 80 to 90%. Like, just again, take my word for it. This is like it's a lot of information that you'd have to memorize and stuff like that. It's like literally impossible to memorize that much stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in 24 hours or 48 hours. The other thing, which probably less of a variable, is that when I was going to law school, they have this thing of like the Socratic method, where essentially every day you would study a case. Like your homework every day was to study a case and be prepared to talk about that case the next day. And the whole kind of game they played is that at any point in time, any day you would get called on as like, and you'd have to be ready for that case. So that was like this extra layer of pressure where it's like you did not want to be that person that, because you have to like stand up and then the teacher like asks you questions and stuff like that, and you did not want to be the person that shut up to class and say, oh, I didn't read this. Like this was like every law school's nightmare is
Mm-hmm.
having the teacher call on them and be okay, Ron, tell us about Johnson versus Rosenthal. What did you think of how the judge ruled on that? Again, it was every law student's worst nightmare to be like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This was just like that. So it was that fear. That was also that pressure that kind of forced us to actually, make sure that we spent a lot of time reading our cases and studying a lot.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to move us further on in the timeline, but before I do that, the one last thought that I had as a takeaway is, I guess, the parallel of because there's the major exam at the end where while there is pressure as you've stated throughout, and so it keeps people diligent. The actual tangible mark is at the end, and it just reminded me of what it must be like to actually be a lawyer, because you do spend a lot of time prepping, meeting with your client, meeting with the opposition, preparing your case and getting ready, and then not every court case lasts only one day. It really depends on the severity of the crime, but there is a difference between having to put all this time to prep for it versus a very narrow window of time to actually fight the case. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some parallels though. Also, isn't that much different than like like a lot of athletes where it's like you're preparing like most of the year for like one big game or one big match or whatnot, so yeah.
Yeah, I see your point there. I guess it depends on how similar what the lawyer is doing in the courtroom is compared to what the athletes are doing, because an athlete is going through the motions and it's a routine. So
Yeah,
in a lot of ways, it's like an act. Like learning stand-up comedy is very much like you prepare your
yeah.
act. So no, I think there's definitely a lot of interesting
Yeah, for
correlations
sure.
there. Yeah. All right. So, what happened to you afterwards? I understand that you came across direct response marketing, and that was a call of sorts to move towards the online marketing space. So, tell us what happened
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So I actually found out about direct response marketing. It was actually towards the end of when I was in law school. I think it was during my third year of law school. Law school's 3 years, and basically that's I found out about direct response marketing. Specifically, that's when I found out about Dan Kennedy, who's one of the godfathers of direct response marketing. And I really went down his rabbit hole and really got off his newsletters, read a lot of his books. And when you read his books and just being exposed to that world, I really kind of was like, oh yeah, this is cool. This is what I want to do. I'm totally into this. So then that's when once I kind of found out about this, that's when I started formulating my escape plan on on how I could not be a lawyer, and how I could get into the online marketing world. At the time, it was called information marketing, because that's when my first ever product was actually we would I would it was a course that I sent people through the mail. This is back in 2006, 2007.
And what I would love to hear just a little bit more detail on is that eureka moment or that aha moment where it was being explained to you as information marketing at the time, and then that click in your mind of, oh, that's how this works. I'd love to hear about like how much you recall of that moment where you really felt like you got it.
So the first book I read by Dan Kennedy himself, it was a book called How to Succeed in Business by Breaking All the Rules. And that book, it kind of just really opened my eyes generally to a different way of thinking, I've by average metrics, I'm definitely not much of a rebel or anything, but in certain contexts, I always kind of consider myself kind of a person who kind of like went against the grain when it comes to a lot of different things. Like, for example, like I lived in Colombia for the last for the last 2 years. That's something that's not kind of the thing an average person would do, just as a for example. So Dan's stuff, it really resonated me from that, where it's like, oh wow, this is cool. And then when he explains, then I guess the big epiphany was he's like, yeah, selling information is the best thing, because information is really valuable, and all you need to do is pay for the cost of printing a CD, or I'm not printing a CD, but printing a manual, and you could sell that manual for $100. So that was kind of my eureka moment, where I was like, oh man, that's awesome. I would love to. I could sell paper for for $100, and I could do that without having to like have a boss.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I want to do that. So I would say would be the big epiphany to answer your specific question.
At this point in the narrative, this is where I wasn't really able to piece together sort of what happened to you next that brings you to the Ron Reich that we're talking to today. So would you care to take us on the rest of that journey, and like how things built up, how you were able to bring coaching into it?
Yeah. I'll give you the quickest version that I can of the story. So I ended up
I tend to prefer the medium length ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be a good length for you. Take my word for it. So the medium length version is that I started my first like information marketing project essentially during my first year when I was working as a lawyer after I passed the bar exam. And that product was actually a how to pass the bar exam program. Because, the thing I learned was that you want to write about what you know. So I just passed the bar exam. It's like, oh, cool. I'll teach people how to pass the bar exam. So that was my first project. And that did okay. It didn't really make me enough money that I could quit my job on, unfortunately.
Mhm.
I maybe made some okay side money on it. I had a friend of mine who was a dating expert, and he was a really good dating expert. He was kind of established in that market, but he was not. He did not really know at the time much about marketing or growing a business. So, but I was kind of, I had some experience with that. So we ended up partnering up, and where I was kind of like the marketer behind the scenes person, and he was the face of the company. And we ended up having a successful partnership. That was my first really successful business. That's the business that allowed me to quit my job. And that was my main business for about 8 years. And towards the end of working in that business, I got connected with this guy named Ryan Levesque, who is he wrote a book called Ask. These days he's a relatively big name in the coaching space. And one thing led to another. I stopped working in that relationship business, and I ended up becoming Ryan's marketing director. And that was my first exposure to essentially ran his marketing for a couple of years. And that was my first exposure to really the proper coaching industry, as well as kind of helping entrepreneurs and coaches grow their businesses. And so, long story short, I ended up working in that for a couple of years, and I ended up ending my engagement with that. It was cool. Me and Ryan are still good friends, and that's when I launched my official Ron Reich brand, where I'm helping other coaches and experts grow their business.
Just because we touched on a lot of threads from in the beginning of this episode in regards to our day-to-day productivity and aligning ourselves to working on the ideal uses of our time. Did you encounter any of that while you're running the marketing side of it? Did you happen to run into any limiting factors, make any breakthroughs in terms of your own efficiency?
Yeah, let me think. That's kind of interesting. I haven't. No, again, no one's asked me this one before either. When I was working with Ryan, yeah, it feels like it was it feels like it was a little bit of a blur in the sense that he was like in a high growth company. No, but I guess to answer your question, but at that time, or even before that, I kind of built the muscle of being productive for quite a bit. So I would say I was doing different things. Like that's when before I worked in that company, essentially what I did most of the time was like write copy. That was a big part of what I did. That was what I spent like 80% of my time doing, or a big percentage of my time doing. So it was very solo. It's very much of a solo process. When I started working with Ryan, that's when I had to do a little bit of that type of stuff, but I had to do more actual, like having like meetings with other people and having to work with a team and things like that. That was kind of, it was just I had to kind of develop a different skill set, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was not a person who liked having a ton of meetings. That was a little bit of an adjustment, because a lot of these like proper companies with bigger teams, there's like you probably know what I'm talking about. It's like they're having meetings all the time, and that was not really my jam. So that took me a little bit of adjustment, and that probably did. I probably felt like I was not as productive as I could have been. Where I would have those thoughts like, why am I on a meeting? I should be just behind my computer banging things out.
I respect that. And full disclosure, as a freelancer who's paid by the hour, meetings are kind of a godsend, because it means I don't have to, I can put some hours on the board, and I don't have to do like the high pressure labor. So, it does benefit some of us.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I remember when I worked as a lawyer, where you're paid it's the same thing. It's like when you actually have to like write a brief or something, that's like actual work. But then like, I mean, I understand why people don't like lawyers, where it's like, I would do things like just like driving to like a case management conference, which is like super easy, but it would take like 5 hours. Like I'd go to court, wait around in court, and I would just talk to the judge for literally like a minute or two. And I would drive back, and I would be like 4 or 5 hours just for that. So I told you that's similar to like a meeting. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, last thing about that, because we're just having fun with this little thread here. But did you figure out anything to do to make those hours count? Like listen to radio or download podcasts on? Well, I don't know if
No, no,
podcasts
no,
when was
no,
around at the time, but like
no,
it's a
no.
lot of
This was
time to just look at the road and be alone with your
oh,
thoughts.
you're talking back in those days. Oh yeah, I would this would have been like around 2007, 2008. Yeah, no,
Oh,
at the
okay,
time
podcasting was yeah.
yeah, I didn't actually that's when I actually didn't really listen to podcasts then. What I would do in those days was, yeah, I would listen to like, yeah, I would listen to music. I would listen to like self-improvement tapes or business. I would listen to like a lot of the Dan Kennedy CDs I would listen to at the time and other stuff along those lines for sure.
Okay, right on. All right, so with the work that you're doing today, the pillar that stuck out to me that I wanted to ask you about is the GPS or Genius Profiting System. And so there's three engines to it. There's launch and evergreen and then high ticket. Now, I think our audience have heard of all these terms, and so I don't think we need to do the 101 class on it, but would you mind just giving us the brief synopsis of the three pillars?
Yeah, the whole idea here is that what I found just from like helping, helping many people go, go from 6 to 7 figures and beyond, from building my own successful businesses, from working behind the scenes in other businesses, as well as reverse engineering a lot of the most successful coaching businesses around. I just kind of found that like the most successful businesses, they really do have these three things going on in their business. Launching, when I say launching, what I really mean is they're doing live promotions on a regular basis, like live campaigns, doing real-time marketing on a regular basis. That's a great way to really, really spike revenue as well as remain relevant. They also have evergreen marketing systems in place. That means they have ways to consistently bring in leads and customers on a regular basis. And then they have higher ticket programs and oftentimes like an ascension ladder to get people from like, a lower program, let's say, to a higher ticket program. It's kind of having these three engines work synergistically.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that is what a sustainable, successful coaching business looks like.
Mm-hmm. And of the three, the one that I would like to explore the elasticity of is the evergreen engine. And only because there is always such rapid change in the market and in the online space. And I myself am an AI junkie, so there's definitely so much going on in that particular space that is hard to ignore. So and what foundation does there need to be in order to, sustain that revenue source or really make something evergreen? And then is there a reasonable limitation to it where it's like, hey, it's been 20 years, might be time for a change?
Well, yeah, and the thing is that our principles are always the same. Our strategy is probably going to be pretty similar, but maybe the tactics, those can be
Mm-hmm.
right. You understand like the hierarchy, right? We have principles, strategy, tactics. So when it comes to any kind of marketing project or any kind of business project, again, it's typically just the tactics that is going to change, like the actual, one thing is so a general principle is you want to have at least one consistent traffic source at every time.
Mm-hmm.
So then then we have our strategy. Okay, our strategy is going to be, okay, our main traffic source is going to be, okay, there you go. SEO. SEO is going to be our one. That's going to be our one traffic source that we're going to focus on because we decided that there's reasons why we want to do that. And then, as you know, because you're more, you're in that world a little bit or maybe a lot, but yeah, of course, you mentioned AI. These days, SEO, the tactics of how to rank on Google, they're changing. It's changing rapidly. So that's the thing that you're going to have to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of one example. And let's say we're creating our evergreen engine. So two principles for an evergreen engine. One of them is we have to have consistent traffic source. We need to have one consistent winning offer. In real life, especially if you're talking about 20-year horizons, that offer is probably going to change. It might be generally the same offer, but there are going to be things that we're going to have to do to innovate on that offer, or we might have to iterate on the offer. So for example, the strategy might be, okay, my main offer is a $5,000, my main entry offer is going to be a $5,000 90-day coaching package. But tactically, there might be different ways we're going to sell that offer, but really it might be the messaging of that offer is going to change because we can't be saying the same thing a year ago as we are today, or we definitely can't be seeing the same thing 5 years ago as we are today when it comes to selling our 90-day $5,000 program. But the best, really the most successful and the sustainable coaches, they're really consistent and they're really able to kind of keep the same thing but just iterate on it, if that makes sense. If it would be amazing if we could all be like McDonald's, right? Like
Yeah.
what like McDonald's is. Like if you look at McDonald's through the past, I'm not sure how long McDonald's has been around, but for the past like 100 years or 50, definitely more than 50 years, it's kind of the same thing. The strategy is the same. The principles are the same. They're selling different things. They're adding different things. Now you can get like salads and coffee on
Yeah.
McDonald's. Those are kind of the tactical things. We essentially want to do the same thing with our evergreen machine. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I appreciate you bringing McDonald's into this because it is a brand that, I mean, most of us have exposure to, at least here in the West. And my partner and I, whenever we visit her parents, we end up, getting McDonald's breakfast as a tradition. And she was like, "Yeah, these McDonald's, they look so different now. They're selling coffees and it looks all nice on the inside.
Yeah,
Remember when we were kids, they used to have
totally,
the
for
play
sure.
places?" And I thought, yeah, I think it's just because they're just selling to the same people. But now that we're growing up, they just want to hold on to us as a market. So it's not like they're focused so much on like the coming up generation or the generation before us. To me, it just seemed funny that they have the same client base and they're just looking for new ways to maintain that connection that we have to it. Because I was a play place kid, right? I went to McDonald's to get the toys, the N64 Fun Zone. So have you seen any instances of that where, as the clientele is shifting, you're realigning your strategy so that you can continue to service their needs, as opposed to like churning out one group for the next group whose avatar is what you currently service?
Well, I think it's pretty analogous where if you look at like yeah like they would have quite a few different ones, but like McDonald's, they have kind of their general avatar. Well, I'm sure like they would have they would probably have real detailed insights on this, but I would imagine it's like families of a certain socioeconomic level, et cetera, et cetera. And they kind of that is their bread and butter, right? And fortunately for them, it's like there's kind of nothing more mass market than McDonald's, right? Like it's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty broad, they have a pretty broad universe of people that could be their clients, right? But when it comes to a coaching business, it's basically the same thing in the sense that you're always better off. This is marketing 101 on having one specific kind of target market that you're focusing on. The majority of markets that people who coach are in, they're basically versions of helping people with their health, helping them with wealth, helping them with their relationships, and generally helping them with improve their lives, like general personal development. All of those markets, they're all pretty evergreen markets in the sense that people are always interested in health, wealth, relationships, and
Mm-hmm.
improving themselves. So, for example, in my market, I primarily my I mentioned like I mostly work with coaches who are doing between $100,000 to $500,000 a year in revenue, and I also work not exclusively, but about 80% of my clients are women are women coaches. So that's the kind of thing where I have confidence. I mean, I can always iterate, but I have confidence like that market's not going to be going anywhere. There's always going to be new coaches, right, that are coming into the market. And I know actually that in real life, the coaching industry specifically, people who want to become coaches and grow coaching businesses, which is my market, that market is growing, right? And again, like a lot of people who coach things, the thing I would be cognizant of course, is like you're always better off, or I would stipulate, or I propose that you're always better off by being in a market that's going to ideally grow, that's going to be evergreen. And it's not really a good idea to be in a market where that could be going by the wayside, right? There's kind of a joke that, like, for example, here's something you'll appreciate. A lot of the people, right? I think you'll appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of the people who, like, a year or two ago were like crypto coaches or crypto consultants are now AI consultants, right? So
Right.
it's kind of like, like, and I know some of these people are smashing it; they're doing really well. But that's a difficult game to play, to always having to like be on the leading edge. I would rather have things be simple and just like, kind of focus on that one specific market. Like I have another example is actually maybe even actually an actual better example. My best friend, a guy by the name of Tony Almeida, he's really the smartest marketer I know. He's one of my friends. We initially met when I was in the dating space,
Mhm.
and he has a very, very, very successful multi seven figure business. And his specific offer, he has one specific offer that he's always kind of updating and innovating, but his one specific offer is really geared towards guys who have a specific girl that either like an ex that they want to get back or they're infatuated with. And this is
Oh,
and
so
he
like
know
one person, not like a type, like not into like goth girls, but like the person with a
yeah,
name
like
and an address.
he wants to get yeah, like
Oh,
this guy
that's
wants to
really
get this
interesting.
one specific girl back.
Yeah.
And he knows this market literally better than anybody on earth because he's been in this space and he's been selling this specific offer for I think like a decade. And he's a really, really smart dude. And that's a great business to be in because and he's had to innovate a lot when it comes to the marketing side. He's had to do different advertising channels. Like he might be doing, Facebook campaigns might be working, and then they're working out as well. Now he's doing YouTube,
Mhm.
and then he might be doing TikTok. Or he's always innovating when it comes to that. Again, that's kind of like the tactical stuff. But again, it is that he's essentially had this one offer to this one market. And again, who knows how things are going to happen? But I have confidence that guys who are infatuated on one specific woman, that's probably they're not gonna disappear anytime soon. They're probably there's I can't think of any reason why they wouldn't always be around. Maybe in 50 years when you can just like program your AI,
I was just about to say,
girlfriend or
yeah, once the
something.
AI, well, and
Yeah.
again, once we get to that point, there are going to be so many variables thrown off that, no one's going to know.
Right.
Like, so
Yeah, yeah, for
it's, yeah,
sure.
in a vacuum, the idea of that changing and everything else being the same is hard to reconcile. So, um, I'm not that I'm in the market for an AI girlfriend, but I'm fascinated to keep my eye on that kind of thing. I did want to just because some of the work that I do is in the Web3 space, which does tie into crypto. So I just wanted to make a point about that. It is important to want to, I agree with you, invest and put the time into things that are long term, but it can be hard to anticipate what those things are, especially the earlier are the market. The more you invest, the more the risk you take, the more of a collapse you might face, but also the more reward. So just from the people that I've talked to, at least in that area, is that it is a slow build, but there is a lot of advantages that are manifesting little by little, if not like say like Bitcoin specific, but the underlying technology to Bitcoin is superior to what a lot of other technology is. It's like if you're in a jungle somewhere where the government isn't exactly stable and you need money, and this is not hypothetical, by the way, this was a story I was told. A guy needed money, he couldn't get any dollars, he couldn't get dinero, he couldn't get euros, he couldn't get anything. The only currency that can make it to him where he was Bitcoin. So there is stuff there. Like I have a lot of faith in it, but I also agree that like people can be very transient and say try to get in on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying like Bitcoin is lame or anything. I'm just pointing out the fact that, and there are people who do this, and
Yeah,
they're just more they're more risk. What is it? They're more willing to take risks than I am. They're
yeah,
just different than I am. Whereas like, yeah, again, lots of risk, lots of reward. So,
yeah.
and
The
to me,
opposite of
that's
risk averse. There's a word there that I
yeah,
can't I can't
whatever the
figure
word
out.
is. Like,
Yeah,
I'm just saying, I think for most people, I'm just more conservative generally,
sure.
right? So it's
Yeah,
like most people, they're better off staying with something that they're going to be like. I'd rather, I'm the kind of person where I'd rather make $1 million on something that's consistent, or I have faith that's consistent, versus make $10 million on something
yeah.
that may or may not work. That's good. That's hard. That's harder, right? But there are people that make a lot more money than I am that do those things, and it's all good. I'm not saying it's all about kind of personal preferences.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and I largely agree with it as well. I wasn't trying to turn that into an argument. I just wanted
No, no,
to
all
give a
good,
shout
all
out to my
good.
boys in the Web3 space.
No, no, all good. Yeah, 100%.
So we're closing in on the hour. I'm gonna probably keep you a little bit over the mark here, but which is why I always ask those kinds of questions at the beginning before we record. Because I did have one person who like he had to go to a client call and he was dancing in the spot like he had to go to the washroom, and I was like, I never want somebody to go through that again.
Right,
So
right.
what I'm curious about next are some of the challenges that you're facing, especially with so much attention and so much activity on marketing channels. So I'm asking this to you, but I'm also happy to hear, by extension, some of the challenges that your clientele are facing. So, with varying marketing channels, content platforms, social media, SEO, YouTube, what are some of the challenges that you've been encountering lately?
So the majority of my personal clients, their main social media channels would be Facebook and Instagram. And what I've known specifically with those is that, and this has been going on for a while, is that basically engagement, basic engagement is down. Like it's harder to get more eyeballs on your content and things along those lines.
Mhm.
So, and also the big thing that's it's actually been going on for a little while, which I think it was like maybe a year and a half ago with all the iOS updates. So advertising has got more difficult. So those are kind of some of the things that I've seen. And it still is kind of the same where, and having said that, the more things change, the more things stay the same in the sense that the kind of antidote to all those is one of the big ones is doubling down on personal connection. Really, the more you can really be a real person and have people connect to you as a person, that is kind of one way to still be able to have a successful business. The other thing is it's kind of cliche, but really, I had a colleague of mine. She said that messaging is the new targeting. It still all comes down to if you have the right message for the right person, they're going to find you. So it's really
Mhm.
just about, again, kind of really dialing in your message even more, maybe even being more niche, being more specific, speaking them into the exact same language, and then of course having the right offer for them. Again, it all comes down to the right person, the right offer at the right time. That's marketing 101, and that's
Mhm.
one thing it's more true today than it ever has been.
Hmm. Yeah, it was definitely a compelling lesson for me to learn. In just the more somebody niches down, the more likely they're going to find success in that field. Whereas being broad, you would think having a larger market might mean more customers, but it makes it harder to be clear on what your offer is.
Yeah, yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
100%.
All right, so I have, let's see here, one and then two more questions left, and both of these are asked with the intention of having fun with it. So, on your YouTube video, so 3 ways to be successful. I'll paraphrase and I'll let you expound on the key details that I unintentionally omitted. But the 3 options to acquire something of great desire, as in the example, it's a Lamborghini. Option 1 is to buy it. Option 2 is not to get it, but get something that is, as good as you can get under the circumstances. And option 3 is to get it through illegitimate means, aka stealing it. The bottom line being is that you have to walk that actual tangible line from acquiring the resources that you need to get the car and then get in the car. And once you make peace with that, you can be on that journey. And the point of the story is to help entrepreneurs and people in business understand that if that's what you want, you got to take that first option. The other two are not going to pay off in the long run. So before I ask the question in proper, I'd say was there any part of that I missed or anything there that you want to make sure is clear?
No, no, that was clear for sure.
Okay. What was challenging to me is, with a direct line to say a Lamborghini is clear because, well, the car is something tangible. I can see it and I know what I have to do. I have to acquire the money to get it. How I get the money, another challenge, but So when helping clients visualize an endpoint like that in their business, do you have a certain metric or methodology to help people have something as clear in their mind as what their goal is, comparable to a luxury car?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, typically, when I teach this example, it's typically in the context of if you want to build, a common thing is everybody wants to build $1 million coaching business, right?
Mhm.
So let's just continue this example. 3 choices. The goal is $1 million coaching business. Same choices. You can pay the price and do what it takes to build a $1 million coaching business. You can try to steal it. Means try to essentially in this context means figure out a shortcut or literally do something illegal to build your $1 million coaching business. Or you can just decide, you know what? I don't want to pay that price. I don't want to build a 7-figure business that bad. those are always your three options. And then if we had more time, I could kind of break down, okay, here is exactly what it takes to really build a seven-figure coaching business. And the truth of the matter is, I guess I will go down this rabbit hole a little bit, is that typically it's pretty formulaic from getting to like zero to a couple hundred thousand, even like four or $500,000 a year in revenue. But really, for a lot of people, going from that $500,000 mark to $1 million per year, oftentimes it just requires them to really grow, and I'm kind of it requires them to really grow to that level.
Mhm.
And it's gonna like it's not it's in most cases it's going to take more effort to get $500,000 to $1 million. But a lot of people think that, oh, I can just kind of go from zero to $500,000. Oh, and I can just kind of keep doing the same effort and I'll get to $1 million. But the
Mhm.
truth of the matter is that in my experience, it's actually not true. And that's kind of the purpose of this story. It's like a lot of people, they're not really willing to pay this price of really building that business that they want, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So
And then the last one that I have for you, this one's definitely the most fun one out of all of them. So I saw that you take your clients out on these expeditions. It's like a mixture of adventuring, but also a mastermind meeting. There is the innate appeal of whitewater rafting in Medellin, Colombia. How do I do?
Yeah, good job. Good
Medellin.
job.
Okay. So, of all of the activities that could be done in the world, was there anything in particular about this activity that ties into the goals you have with your clients, or what you want people to learn, compared to like taking people to paintball in the forest or skydiving, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, to answer your question, a lot of these things really do come. They kind of come organically in the sense that, so I started doing masterminds in Colombia that did not involve whitewater rafting. Here's the actual story. That did not involve whitewater rafting in back in 2015. Then like later on, actually I'll give the actual story. So then I have a friend and mentor, a guy by the name of James Schramko. I saw this would have been around 2017, 2018. He did a mastermind. He's into surfing. He did a mastermind. It was a surf mastermind where he would take people on a boat for like a week in the Maldives where they would hang out and go surfing. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I kind of like this idea of having a sporting aspect of a mastermind. So then I had this idea of that epiphany. Hey, I'm gonna create the rafter mind because I had gone
Hmm.
whitewater rafting a couple times. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then it just so happened that I've been doing these masterminds in Colombia, and then there's like whitewater rafting in Colombia. So I was like, okay, score, perfect. So we're gonna next time I do the Colombia mastermind, we'll do a mastermind. The first one we just did a mastermind for one day. Then we did this overnight rafting trip. That was kind of like the trial version. People got a lot out of it. And then this was the first one that was that was the early part of 2018. So that was 5 years ago. And then it kind of became a thing where I've been kind of innovating on the event since then. Like I like rafting. Rafting is really fun. I'm also personally not really into like heights or like skydiving and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So for me, like it's a good get outside your comfort zone. And it just so happens that when we do the mastermind these days, there's just a lot of other amazing. It's a great activity for so many reasons because it's like, it's like you're getting out in nature, you're totally disconnected, you're with a cool group of people. There's like the teamwork aspect
Hmm.
of when you're rafting itself. There's that aspect of getting outside your comfort zone for a lot of people. So it's a pretty optimal activity. And these days, I'm actually planning my next Columbia mastermind event, which will be in July. And the big theme for this one, it's really about upgrading your mindset. And upgrading your identity. And so a big part of that, of course, it is that idea of like stepping outside your comfort zone and becoming that new, better version of yourself. And rafting is kind of a great container for that. So it all just kind of works out.
Hmm. And then one thing that I want to say to that too that I appreciate is that it also is a way to Just remind us that nature is still the most formidable force on the planet.
For
And
sure.
whitewater
Totally.
rafting, you can't exactly sit back and relax like you're going on a fishing
For
trip in a
sure.
lake. You do have to sit
Exactly.
up and focus and pay attention to instructions.
It's a great way to be in the moment for sure.
Exactly. All right. Well, Ron, that is everything that we've got for today. So we're going to wrap this up. I did want to give you the floor one more time, just in case there was either some aspect of your operation you just wanted to make sure was conveyed to the audience, or any lingering thoughts. The floor is yours once more. And if not, just let the audience know how they might go about looking into you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed our conversation. It's actually a lot different than a lot of other podcast interviews I've done.
I'm glad to
And yeah, I
hear.
would just say if anybody's gotten any if you've gotten value about this, if you've gotten value from this podcast and would like to connect with me more, best way to do it is just to hit me up on Facebook. Just go to my personal Facebook profile. You could follow me there, and if you send me a DM on Facebook, send me one. Let me know that you came from this podcast, and I will send you a special gift. So there you go.
Okay, fantastic. And to my audience, as always, thank you for your time, your attention, your I was going to say patronage, but I'm just pulling
That's
that
a
out
good
of
word.
thin
I
air.
like it.
I do too. It really does mean a great deal to me to be able to, be one person at the beginning of the hour, then feel like I'm a slightly different person at the end of the hour. So this is a great journey for me to be on, and thank you for everybody who helps in their own way. If you are of any interest in participating in the program, or you just want to reach out, you get feedback, you can email interviews at impactfulcoachingpodcast.com. It is spelled the way you think. And with that, whatever it is your aspiration, we hope you aspire to, no matter what, be impactful while you're at it.